A teacher once asked two students to describe the same day. The first said, "The weather was cold. My tea was lukewarm. The meditation hall was crowded." The second said, "I woke up breathing. I had tea to drink. I sat among others on the path." The teacher nodded. Same day, different lens. And the lens you choose determines the life you live. We're always standing in front of the same glass of water. Half full, half empty. The amount doesn't change, but how we see it changes everything. And the strange thing is, we act as if our perspective is determined by circumstances, as if gratitude is something that happens to us when conditions are right. But it's not. Gratitude is a choice, a decision, a way of directing attention that's available in almost every moment. Regardless of what's happening around you, you can have everything: health, loved ones, stability, comfort, and still walk through life feeling empty, dissatisfied, focused on what's missing. Or you can have very little and feel profound appreciation for what's here. The difference isn't in the circumstances. It's in where you place your attention. And that placement is always a choice. The Buddhist teaching points to this directly. The mind tends toward craving and aversion. It fixates on what it wants and doesn't have, or what it has and doesn't want. This is the root of dukkha, suffering. Not because life is lacking, but because the mind is trained to see lack. It overlooks what's present in favor of what's absent. It takes the good for granted and magnifies the bad. And from that lens, no amount of external improvement will ever be enough. But when you shift the lens, when you consciously direct your attention toward what's working, what's here, what you still have, the internal experience changes, not because reality changed, but because your relationship to reality changed. And that relationship is where your actual life is lived, not in the facts, but in how you meet the facts. This isn't about denying difficulty. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. The teaching doesn't ask you to ignore pain or loss. It asks you to recognize that even in difficulty, there's still something to be grateful for. The fact that you're breathing, the fact that you can still feel, the fact that you're alive to experience this moment, however hard it is. And when you anchor yourself in that gratitude, the difficulty doesn't disappear, but your capacity to meet it grows. In Zen, there's a practice of bowing to everything, not as worship, but as acknowledgement. You bow to the meal, you bow to the water, you bow to the day. This isn't sentimentality. It's training. It's teaching the mind to notice what it receives, to recognize that nothing is automatic, that every moment of aliveness is a gift you didn't earn and can't control. And in that noticing, gratitude arises naturally. But most of us don't practice this. We wait for gratitude to arrive on its own, as if it's something that will happen when we finally have enough money, enough security, enough comfort, enough recognition. And so we postpone feeling grateful, waiting for the conditions to be perfect. But perfection never comes. There's always something missing, always something to worry about, always a reason to withhold appreciation. The Taoist teaching says, "He who is contented is rich." Not he who has the most, but he who wants the least. And wanting less doesn't mean settling. It means recognizing what's already here. It means training your attention to rest on sufficiency instead of scarcity. And that training is a practice, not a passive state. This is where the real work is, because your state of being doesn't come from external factors. It comes from your inner posture, the way you meet what arises, the stories you tell about it, the meaning you assign to it. Two people can live the same day and have completely different experiences, not because the day was different, but because their internal stance was different. And here's the deepest layer. Your inner state affects the outer world, not magically, but practically. When you walk through life feeling grateful, resilient, accepting, you show up differently. You speak differently. You treat people differently. You make different choices, and those choices create different outcomes. The external circumstances may not change immediately, but your relationship to them does. And over time, that shift ripples outward. When you're consumed by what's missing, you move through the world contracted, defended, focused on lack. And that contraction limits what you can see, what you can receive, what you can create. But when you're rooted in gratitude, you move through the world open, receptive, aware of possibility. And that openness changes what becomes available to you, not because the universe rewards positive thinking, but because you're present enough to notice and act on what's already here. So the question isn't whether you have enough to be grateful for, The question is, are you choosing gratitude with what you have? Are you noticing the miracle of being alive? The fact that someone you love is still breathing? That you have work, shelter, food? That you woke up today with another chance? These aren't small things. They're everything. But the mind dismisses them as ordinary, as baseline, as insufficient. And in that dismissal, it creates its own suffering. Because no matter how much you accumulate, the mind that's trained to see lack will always find something missing. But you can retrain it. You can practice gratitude the way you practice anything else, deliberately, repeatedly, until it becomes a reflex. You can start each day by noticing 3 things you're grateful for. Not grand things, simple things: breath, warmth, quiet. And in that practice, the lens begins to shift. The glass is still half full and half empty. But you stop measuring and start drinking. The second student didn't have more than the first, but he saw more. And in that seeing, he found wealth that no circumstance could take away. If you choose to follow this channel, it truly helps me keep creating and improving these reflections. And if not, that's completely okay. I'm grateful you spent this time here. I'll see you tomorrow in the next episode. Until then, I wish you a calm and peaceful day.